June 1944. The Atlantic Ocean was a restless battlefield, its waves hiding dangers that could strike at any moment. Far off the coast of West Africa, a story was about to unfold that few Americans knew then or even now. It was not a massive clash of fleets, nor a famous turning point like Normandy or Midway. Instead, it was a tale of sheer courage, reckless determination, and audacious brilliance, an operation so daring that even the men who carried it out later admitted they could hardly believe they survived. Its name, the capture of U-505, the only time in World War II that the U.S. Navy successfully seized a German submarine at sea. Imagine it, a proud Kriegsmarine U-boat forced to surface after relentless depth charge attacks. Its crew abandoning ship smoke pouring from its hull, seawater rushing in. Inside demolition charges and scuttling devices were already set. The vessel was supposed to sink, taking with it every secret it carried, forever lost to the deep. But in that fleeting, chaotic moment, a small group of American sailors did the unthinkable. They leapt aboard a dying submarine, racing through smoke-filled corridors and half-flooded compartments, risking explosion and drowning alike. Their mission to salvage a small, unassuming machine that could tip the balance of the entire Battle of the Atlantic, the Enigma cipher device. What happened next was more than a naval skirmish. It was a hidden victory, the kind of triumph that doesn't make headlines during wartime but reshapes the course of history. During World War II, the Atlantic Ocean was far more than a body of water separating continents. It was the lifeline of the Allied war effort. From the east coast of the United States, convoys carried millions of tons of weapons, fuel, food, and soldiers to Britain supplies, without which the fight in Europe could not survive. If those shipping lanes were severed, the entire Allied campaign on the continent would collapse. Nazi Germany knew this all too well. To strangle that lifeline, they unleashed one of their most feared weapons, the U-boat. These wolf packs prowled silently beneath the waves, stalking Allied convoys and striking with sudden devastating torpedo attacks. In the first years of the war, they sank thousands of merchant and military vessels, spreading terror across the Atlantic. The threat was so severe that the waters off America's own east coast became grimly known as Torpedo Junction. What made the U-boats so effective was not only their stealth and firepower, but also the tight coordination that guided them. Orders from the Kriegsmarine High Command were encrypted by a machine the Germans believed unbreakable, the Enigma cipher device. At first glance, it resembled nothing more than a typewriter, but inside was a labyrinth of rotors and wiring capable of generating trillions of code combinations. To the Germans, Enigma was their shield of invisibility. For the Allies, however, capturing such a machine, complete with the codebooks and daily key sheets, was like holding the enemy's brain in their hands. It meant the possibility of reading U-boat orders in real time, predicting wolfpack ambushes, and saving countless ships and lives. But seizing an intact Enigma was nearly impossible. German crews were trained to destroy their codes and scuttle their vessels the moment capture seemed imminent. Dozens of opportunities had slipped through Allied fingers when U-boat sailors blew up their own submarines, rather than let them fall into enemy hands. By mid-1944, the Allies had made progress against the U-boat menace thanks to advances in radar sonar and air patrols. Yet the submarine threat still loomed large. Even a handful of U-boats could cripple supply lines if left unchecked. For American naval commanders, the chance to seize not just a U-boat, but also its codes, was the kind of dream that could tilt the entire Battle of the Atlantic in their favor. That chance arrived on June 4, 1944. Off the coast of West Africa, the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal and her hunter-killer group detected signs of a lurking submarine, U-505. After a fierce hunt, depth charges forced the German vessel to the surface. What happened next would test the courage, skill, and sheer nerve of the sailors involved. This was the backdrop to one of the most extraordinary hidden victories of the U.S. Navy, a moment when history itself seemed to pause, offering a fleeting opportunity to snatch secrets from the jaws of the sea. The morning of June 4, 1944 began like countless others for the men of Task Group 22.3, a U.S. Navy hunter-killer group patrolling the Atlantic off the coast of West Africa. Commanded by Rear Admiral Daniel V. Gallery, the group was built around the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal, supported by 5 destroyer escorts, USS Chatelain, USS Pillsbury, USS Jenks, USS Flaherty, and USS Pope. Their mission was clear: to find and destroy German U-boats before those submarines could strike Allied convoys. By that summer, the U-boat menace had already cost the Allies dearly. But Gallery's task force was among the most aggressive units at sea, trained and eager to take the fight directly to Germany's undersea hunters. For days they had patrolled in the blistering African heat without success. But on that morning, fortune turned. At 11:09 a.m., an Avenger aircraft from USS Guadalcanal spotted an oil slick spreading across the waves, a telltale sign of a submarine leaking fuel below. The pilot swooped low, confirming the suspicion. He radioed the fleet contact possible submarine. Immediately, the hunter-killer group sprang into action. Sirens wailed. Crews scrambled to battle stations. The destroyer escort USS Chatelain was the first to converge on the location. Sonar pings echoed beneath the waves, bouncing off the steel hull of the German boat. The target was confirmed: U-505, a Type 1C submarine commanded by Kapitänleutnant Harold Lang. Unknown to the Americans, this submarine had already endured a troubled career, plagued by mechanical issues and morale problems. But in that moment, it was still a lethal predator, capable of sinking ships with a single torpedo. The order was given: attack. Chatelain raced forward and unleashed a pattern of depth charges. Explosions thundered underwater, the sea erupting with plumes of spray. Inside, U-505 chaos reigned. The hull groaned under the shock lights flickered and pipes burst. Water sprayed into compartments, filling the stale air with the acrid stench of diesel and salt. The crew, shaken and terrified, struggled to control the flooding, but the damage was too great. In desperation, Captain Lang gave the only order left: surface the boat. At 11:21 a.m., U-505 broke through the waves, its gray hull battered smoke trailing from its exhaust. For the Americans, it was a surreal sight: a German submarine forced into the open, exposed and vulnerable. Almost instantly, the destroyers opened fire. Deck guns hammered the U-boat's conning tower. Machine guns raked the deck. German sailors scrambled in panic, leaping into the sea to save themselves. Some attempted to arm demolition charges to scuttle the submarine, but panic and speed left the job unfinished. U-505 began to list heavily to one side, seawater pouring into her interior. On the American ships, the sight electrified the crews. Here was a once-in-a-lifetime chance not to sink a U-boat, but to capture one alive. Admiral Gallery, watching from USS Guadalcanal, seized the moment. He gave a historic order board: that submarine. The command defied convention. Standard naval doctrine dictated that enemy submarines should be destroyed, not captured. The risk was too high: scuttling charges, hidden mines, even the chance of booby-traps designed to kill boarding parties. Yet Gallery recognized the immense value of what might be inside the Enigma machine codebooks and tactical orders. To destroy the U-boat now would be to waste an intelligence treasure beyond measure. A boarding party was quickly assembled on USS Pillsbury. Armed sailors clambered into a whaleboat and rowed furiously toward the stricken U-boat, waves splashing over their helmets. As they approached, they could see the German crew bobbing in the water, hands raised in surrender. The submarine itself loomed before them, groaning and hissing, as if the sea itself was trying to claim it. The chase was over, but the real danger had only just begun. The Americans had forced U-505 to the surface. Now, to claim victory, they would have to seize her before she sank beneath them, along with every secret she carried. The order had been given, and now the moment of truth arrived. On the destroyer escort USS Pillsbury, the boarding party rushed to prepare. Volunteers were called, though in truth there was no shortage of eager hands. Every man on deck understood the risks: the U-boat could explode from scuttling charges at any second, or sink beneath the waves and drag them down with it. Yet when Admiral Gallery's words "board that submarine" echoed across the task group, not a single sailor hesitated. A small whaleboat was lowered into the churning sea. The boarding team, led by Lieutenant Albert L. David, climbed aboard, their weapons slung over their shoulders and their hearts pounding with adrenaline. David was a quiet man by nature, not one to seek the spotlight, but at this moment he embodied calm determination. His mission was clear: secure the submarine, rescue whatever intelligence could be saved, and prevent the Germans from destroying their secrets. As the whaleboat drew closer, the sight before the Americans was haunting. U-505 lay crippled and half-submerged, her gray steel hull scarred by depth charges and gunfire. Smoke poured from her conning tower, mingling with the salty spray of the Atlantic. German sailors floated nearby, their uniforms dark in the water, hands lifted in surrender. But no one knew what traps might still be hidden inside. The boarding party climbed up the slick, slanted deck of the submarine. The metal burned hot from gunfire, in places icy cold with seawater in others. Every step could be their last. If scuttling charges had been properly set, the boat might blow apart beneath them. Still, they pressed forward. Lieutenant David was the first through the open hatch. Inside, the air was suffocating thick with smoked diesel fumes and the stench of seawater. Darkness swallowed the narrow corridors, broken only by the wavering beams of American flashlights. Water gushed through ruptured seams, flooding compartments with a steady roar. The sailors split into teams. One group headed for the engine room, where seawater threatened to drown the entire vessel. They scrambled to close valves and shut down engines working knee-deep in icy water. Another team rushed toward the control room, searching for demolition charges or timed explosives that might still be armed. Every second mattered. In the radio room, a breakthrough American hands grasped bundles of soggy papers, codebooks, signal logs, daily cipher keys. The sailors stuffed them into canvas bags, their urgency fueled by the knowledge that each scrap of paper might save lives in the Atlantic. Then came the most electrifying discovery of all. Sitting on a desk still intact despite the chaos around it was the prize they had hoped for, a naval Enigma machine. Shouts rang out, "Enigma, we've got it!" The small device, no larger than a typewriter, was hoisted into waiting arms like treasure. Alongside it, the codebooks and key sheets were secured. It was the very heart of the Kriegsmarine's secret communications, something Germany believed would never fall into Allied hands. And now, against all odds, it belonged to the U.S. Navy. Meanwhile, the struggle to save the submarine continued. The boarding party battled flooding in compartment after compartment. Pumps were rigged hoses, deployed lines thrown across the deck as ships of the task group moved in to tow the stricken U-boat. Above the roar of machinery and the hiss of seawater, voices barked commands, steady and urgent. Keep her afloat. Don't let her roll. For nearly an hour, the sailors toiled in the dark belly of U-505. Their boots sloshed through rising water. Their lungs burned from the fumes. Their nerves screamed with the constant fear of hidden charges detonating. Yet slowly, methodically, they gained control. The submarine shuddered, groaned, but it did not sink. At last, the boarding party emerged back onto the deck, drenched, exhausted, but triumphant. In their arms they carried the spoils of courage, sacks of secret documents, and the gleaming Enigma machine itself. On the nearby ships, their comrades erupted in cheers. Against every expectation, they had done the impossible. Lieutenant Albert L. David, the first man aboard and the steady hand who led the mission, would later be awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery that day. But in truth, every sailor in that boarding party shared in the glory. Together, they had captured a living enemy submarine and preserved its priceless secrets. The daring boarding of U-505 was unlike anything in U.S. naval history. It was not just a tactical victory, it was a triumph of courage over fear, of determination over chaos. For those men, June 4, 1944, would forever be remembered as the day they stared death in the face and seized victory from the depths. When the American sailors finally clambered back onto the deck of USS Pillsbury and USS Guadalcanal, their arms laden with soaked documents and a strange typewriter-like device, few could grasp the enormity of what they had just accomplished. At first glance, it was a daring feat of seamanship, the capture of a German submarine. But the true weight of that achievement lay hidden in the details, the intelligence, the secrets, the priceless keys to Germany's war machine that had just been salvaged from the brink of the abyss. The treasure in dripping canvas bags inside the canvas sacks were soggy but intact codebooks, cipher logs, and key sheets. To most sailors, they looked like meaningless bundles of paper. To the cryptanalysts waiting on shore, they were nothing less than gold. These were the daily keys that dictated how the Enigma machine scrambled its letters. Without them, Allied codebreakers had to rely on guesswork, statistical analysis, and luck. With them, they could align their machines with the Germans' exact settings and read orders almost as quickly as they were sent. The Americans had not only captured an Enigma machine, they had seized the Rosetta Stone of the Atlantic War. A naval Enigma like no other. The Enigma recovered from U-505 was not a standard three-rotor machine already known to the Allies. It was a naval variant, far more complex, with additional rotors and plugboard settings that produced astronomical combinations. Germany's U-boat fleet relied on these machines to coordinate wolfpack operations, confident that their codes were unbreakable. For months, Allied cryptographers had struggled to keep pace with changes in German cipher systems. Often by the time they solved a message, the information was already out of date. Now with the Enigma and its codebooks in hand, the Allies could read the enemy's mail in near real time. For the first time in the war, they could anticipate U-boat ambushes instead of stumbling into them. The silence of secrecy. Yet this monumental victory could not be celebrated. If the Germans realized U-505 had been captured intact, they would immediately change their codes, rendering the prize useless. And so, the U.S. Navy imposed absolute silence. The German crew were whisked away into isolated POW camps where they could not communicate with anyone. The submarine itself was towed under heavy guard to Bermuda, repainted and disguised to conceal its true identity. The press heard nothing. The public knew nothing. Even many within the Navy were kept in the dark. Only a handful of intelligence officers and high-ranking commanders were aware of the true treasure U-505 carried. For the men who risked their lives boarding the sub, there would be no parades or newspaper headlines, only the quiet knowledge that they had changed the war. A turning point in the Atlantic. From that summer forward, the impact was immediate. Convoys that once sailed blind now had forewarning of wolfpack positions. Allied escorts could intercept submarines before they struck. The death toll of merchant sailors began to fall. Supplies that might once have been lost to the depths now reached England safely. Supplies that armed the divisions storming Normandy, fueled the tanks driving across France, and fed the soldiers who would eventually march into Germany. The capture of U-505 did not single-handedly win the Battle of the Atlantic, but it tipped the scales at a critical moment. It shortened the war at sea, saved untold lives, and safeguarded the flow of men and material that made ultimate victory possible. The hidden triumph. For decades, the boarding of U-505 remained one of America's best-kept wartime secrets. The sailors involved received little recognition, their heroism known only to a select few. But history has since revealed the truth that on June 4, 1944, a handful of ordinary men achieved an extraordinary feat. They captured not just a submarine, but the beating heart of Nazi Germany's Atlantic campaign. It was a hidden victory, in every sense unseen, unheralded, but decisive. And like so many hidden victories, its true impact was measured not in headlines, but in lives saved, convoys protected, and freedom preserved. More than a naval battle. The capture of U-505 was far more than a dramatic skirmish at sea. It was the convergence of courage, intelligence, and strategic foresight. At a time when the Allies were preparing for the invasion of Normandy, every advantage mattered. The secrets salvaged from the submarine provided a silent edge that helped secure victory on a far larger stage. Saving lives on the Atlantic lifeline. Perhaps the most immediate impact was on the Atlantic convoys. With the Enigma machine and codebooks in Allied hands, U.S. and British cryptographers could predict U-boat movements with unprecedented accuracy. Convoys could be rerouted away from ambushes. Escort ships could be sent directly to intercept lurking submarines. The result was a dramatic reduction in sinkings. Thousands of merchant sailors who might have perished in cold, dark waters lived to see home again. Every ship that crossed the Atlantic safely carried not just cargo, but hope that the Allies could maintain their momentum and ultimately crush the Nazi war machine. Fueling the invasion of Europe, the timing of the capture was critical. Just 2 days after U-505 was boarded, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, the D-Day landings in Normandy. Behind those landings lay a colossal logistical effort, millions of tons of supplies, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and a constant stream of reinforcements crossing from America to Britain, then onward to France. Had German U-boats been free to prowl unchecked, those convoys could have been slaughtered. But thanks in part to the intelligence from U-505, the lifeline held firm. The beaches of Normandy were supplied, the bridgehead expanded, and the liberation of Western Europe became unstoppable. The lesson of boldness. The decision to board U-505 was by all conventional logic reckless. Naval doctrine dictated destruction, not capture. Yet Admiral Gallery chose otherwise, gambling that the potential reward outweighed the risks. That gamble paid off beyond expectation. The lesson endures in war. Sometimes the boldest path is the one that reshapes history. The sailors who charged into a sinking submarine did not know whether they would emerge alive. But their willingness to act turned a fleeting opportunity into a lasting triumph. Decades of silence. Ironically, the very importance of the victory required it to be hidden. For the remainder of the war, the capture of U-505 was one of the Allies' most closely guarded secrets. The German crew were isolated in special camps. The submarine itself was disguised, towed to Bermuda, and concealed from prying eyes. Not until years later did the public learn what had truly happened. For the men who risked their lives that day, the silence was difficult. There were no headlines or parades, no chance to share their story with loved ones. They returned to duty as if nothing had occurred. Only after declassification decades later did they receive the recognition they deserved. A museum piece, a teaching tool today. U-505 rests not at the bottom of the ocean, but in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Preserved inside a vast exhibition hall, it is the only German U-boat on display in the United States. Visitors walk through its cramped corridors, seeing firsthand the perilous environment where Americans once raced against time to snatch secrets from the sea. For school children, veterans, and history enthusiasts alike, U-505 has become a powerful teaching tool. It is a tangible reminder that history is shaped not only by grand battles, but also by hidden victories, moments of quiet heroism that change the tide of war. The hidden victory remembered, the true legacy of U-505 lies in its symbolism. It was a triumph of brains and bravery of men who dared to act when hesitation might have cost everything. It was a hidden victory, unheralded at the time, but decisive in its consequences. When historians recount World War II, they often highlight Midway Normandy or the Battle of the Bulge. Yet among those towering events, the capture of U-505 stands as a reminder that sometimes history is rewritten not by armies of millions, but by a handful of sailors. June 1944. Just days before Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, a small band of American sailors in the Atlantic performed an act so bold, so improbable, that its full impact was hidden for decades. They boarded a sinking enemy submarine, snatched its secrets from the jaws of the sea, and handed the Allies a priceless advantage in the Battle of the Atlantic. It was not a victory of overwhelming numbers or firepower. It was not a clash of titans remembered in monuments and parades. It was the quiet triumph of ordinary men who for a few fateful minutes displayed extraordinary courage. They risked drowning fire and explosion to seize what others thought impossible, the enemy's own secrets. Today, The submarine they captured U-505 sits in a museum in Chicago, preserved as a monument to their bravery. Visitors who walk its narrow corridors can almost feel the desperation of that day, hear the rush of water flooding compartments, and imagine the pounding hearts of the Americans who dared to step inside. The story of U-505 reminds us that history is not only shaped by grand battles, but also by hidden victories, moments that unfold in silence and secrecy, often unseen by the world at large. Yet these moments ripple outward, saving lives, shaping strategies, and altering the course of history itself. For the men of Task Group 22.3 June 4, 1944, was not about glory or headlines. It was about duty, courage, and seizing opportunity in the face of danger. And though their triumph was hidden from the public for years, its legacy remains. The capture of U-505 is more than a chapter in naval history. It is a timeless lesson that courage, when combined with vision and daring, can achieve the impossible.